planet Earth. 4.5 billion years in the making, carved and shaped by the forces of nature. From the highest mountain to the deepest ocean, the ultimate global journey, uncovering nature at its most spectacular. Earth Wonders. On this journey, we discover the breathtaking splendor of New Zealand's Milford Sound. We follow the Earth's most spectacular migration on the plains of the Serengeti. Explore a green and rocky paradise in Zion National Park. Catch the world's highest tide in Canada's Bay of Fundy. And swim between continents where Iceland cracks in two. But first, we head to the border of Utah and Arizona to explore Monument Valley, home to some of the most striking and famous geological formations in the world. This landscape has provided the definitive and enduring images of the American West. Dramatic rock shapes rising steeply from the desert floor have become the backdrop for countless films and westerns. The beautifully colored sandstone rocks in Monument Valley also tell an extraordinary story of the erosive action of wind and water, stretching over the last 50 million years. It's a panorama of mystery and timeless beauty. As day breaks in Monument Valley, something magical happens. The dawn light reveals the sculpted rock formations that tower up to 1,000 feet above the flattened landscape. The famous mittens are so called because their rock pinnacles resemble gloved fingers and a thumb. The totem pole looks like it has been carefully and deliberately carved. These sandstone spires and megaliths that give Monument Valley its name appear to have stood here unchanged since the dawn of time. In fact, this area is in a state of constant change. It's midway through a dramatic geological transformation. Despite the name, Monument Valley is not a valley. It's a wide, flat plain interspersed with the crumbling remains of thick layers of sandstone that once covered the whole region. About 300 million years ago, this area was a lowland basin, which gradually became covered by sediments and sand that slowly turned to rock. This rocky plain then underwent a process of uplifting and folding, which broke up the thick rock layers into separate pieces. Sandstone is easily eroded, and wind, rain, and cycles of frost and heat have been at work, cracking and chiseling the great chunks of rock into their present forms. In between the large, flat-topped rock islands known as mesas and the narrower towers of rock called buttes is a barren desert. It's a place of stark and desolate beauty that some believe contains mystical powers. Monument Valley spreads over the Navajo Nation Tribal Park. It has great significance to the Navajo people, who maintain a careful relationship of harmony and respect with the land. The Navajo believe that these rocks and all elements in nature are endowed with spirits, and that great knowledge can be learned from them. It's a tradition and belief that's kept alive by the Navajo people, who still live and work in Monument Valley today. Murphy Yazzie has been driving her sheep here for decades. The four-horned Churro sheep graze on the sparse desert shrubs. While Effie takes her flock on its daily round, she passes spectacular rock formations, such as the natural arch known as the Ear of the Winds. Another arch with an equally evocative name is the Eye of the Sun. Natural arches are caused when softer spots of sandstone are worn through by millions of years of water and weather erosion. These and the other ancient rock features have been seen by far earlier settlers than the Navajo. Throughout Monument Valley are traces of earlier civilizations. Brick-built houses, painted handprints, and beautiful carved petroglyphs of mysterious animals were the work of the Anasazi, a Puebloan people who lived here over 1,000 years ago. Today, the desolate charm of Monument Valley is enjoyed by people from far and wide, but it's never crowded. It's easy to feel you are the only visitor here.
Nice loose reins, okay?
Okay, here we go.
As this is the Wild West, horseback riding is the best way to get around. Thick sand and scattered rocks put this desert region out of the reach of most vehicles.
Yeah.
Horses, with their natural way of picking through obstacles, are very much at home. On horseback, trekking into Monument Valley's backcountry, it's impossible not to feel a little like John Wayne. It was here that director John Ford shot many classic westerns, such as Stagecoach and The Searchers. These enduring films have helped make the buttes and mesas of Monument Valley so recognizable and iconic. Many of today's cowboys have turned from 4 hooves to 4 wheels. ATVs provide an alternative way to get off the beaten track and explore the lesser visited parts of this rugged landscape. For those who don't want to stray too far from the highway, but still want the romance of the West, Route 163 provides the ideal place to hit the open road, with Monument Valley as an almost surreal backdrop. It's hard to believe that in a few more million years, Monument Valley will be reduced to a flat desert. Today, its great rock formations still stand proud and captivate everyone who sees them. Next, Earth Wonders explores the epic natural backdrop for the Lord of the Rings movies. On the edge of New Zealand's South Island, bordering the Tasman Sea, lies Milford Sound. Milford Sound is a vast system of bays protected by towering snow-capped peaks. The whole of New Zealand is a geological wonderland. The 2 islands are brimming with natural wonders. At the heart of the larger South Island, massive granite cliffs rear upwards into the clouds. This is Fjordland. Jungle Book author Rudyard Kipling called it the 8th wonder of the world. Milford Sound is the jewel of this spectacular landscape. The name Milford Sound is misleading because a sound is formed by ancient river action, But this natural wonder was formed by ice. It was once a long, deep valley gouged out by a slow-moving glacier. When the glacier retreated at the end of the last ice age, the sea flooded in. Milford Sound is in fact a fjord, just like those found in Norway and Alaska. The glacier that carved Milford Sound opened only a small passage from sea to valley. So small that millions of years later, when European explorers came here in search of safe harbors, they dismissed it. But in 1812, when Welshman John Grono finally ventured through the narrow pass, a stunning network of bays opened up, stretching 7 miles into the interior. Here, dolphins play, and forested mountains rise nearly a mile into the sky. It reminded him of his home, and he named it after Milford Haven in Wales, in Britain. 1,000 years before that, New Zealand's original settlers, the Maoris, came here to mine greenstone, a very hard type of jade used to make carving tools. They believe Milford Sound itself was carved by such a tool wielded by the god Titerani Wanoa. The real drama of this landscape is provided by the awe-inspiring peaks that surround it. Elephant and Lion Mountains and the soaring Mitre Peak rise straight from the water. This spectacular mountain landscape and the dense temperate forests that cling to the steep slopes were used to represent Middle-earth in the Lord of the Rings movies. The Antarctic beech grows here. As its name suggests, it once grew in the now treeless Antarctica. Ancient fossil forests have been found there beneath the ice, evidence that at one time the land masses of Antarctica and New Zealand were connected. Lichen live off the saturated tree branches, and hundreds of species of ferns carpet the forest floor. This is home to the kea, one of the world's few alpine parrots, legendary for its intelligence and curiosity. Neither the Maoris nor the Europeans built large settlements at Milford Sound. Perhaps the weather had some part to play in that decision. It's one of the wettest places on Earth. On average, you need an umbrella here for at least 200 days a year. Glaciers gave Milford Sound its shape, but the abnormally high rainfall has given the sound its most dazzling tourist attraction: waterfalls. From the permanent thundering Sterling Falls to the thousands of temporary cascades that drop from hanging valleys or sheer rock faces, all of this rain has a mysterious effect on life in the Sound. Creatures that normally live in the deep are found thriving in shallow water here. Because the gallons of rain, stained by organic matter from the forests, ends up as a thick, murky layer of fresh water that blocks the light, darkening the saltwater world below. Visitors don't need to dive to see the fascinating species that thrive here. An ambitious underwater observatory gives a rare view of black coral and huge spiny starfish. Birds and marine mammals take advantage of the rich fish population. Milford Sound has its own resident New Zealand fur seal colony, 3 different species of dolphin, and 1 extremely rare bird, a white heron. Only 120 of these birds have been spotted in all of New Zealand. Despite its remote location, Milford Sound is New Zealand's major tourist attraction and one of Earth's most cherished natural wonders. Formed over millions of years, shaped by ice and rain, home to the rare and the beautiful, this majestic fjord testifies to nature's creative powers on an epic scale. Coming up on Earth Wonders, a journey on nature's ultimate round trip across the wild plains of Africa. Each year, the grasslands of East Africa form the backdrop to an extraordinary natural event. 2 million grazing mammals embark on an exhausting journey across the Serengeti, following the rains in search of lush vegetation. The great annual migration takes place in a vast area of grassland, some 11,500 square miles, stretching across Tanzania and into Kenya. Every year, 500,000 wildebeest, 400,000 gazelle, and 200,000 zebra walk a staggering 1,800 miles in a giant loop. Along the way, they will give birth to their young. They will negotiate many geological hazards and fight off an army of predators, always close on their heels. The Great Migration is quite simply the most magnificent wildlife show on the planet. The Serengeti ecosystem is one of the Earth's oldest. The essential features of climate, vegetation, and fauna have barely changed in the past 1 million years. The yearly pattern of rains nourishes the grasslands. All the while, huge herds of grazing mammals instinctively circle the savanna, searching for where the food is most plentiful. In turn, Africa's famed predators rely on the arrival of these herds for their survival. This great drama is constantly played out to the rhythm of the seasons. Having spent much of September and October in Kenya's Masai Mara, the herds will start to move south into Tanzania, where the brief rains refresh the wide grassy plains. At the forefront of the migration movement are the majestic herds of zebra. They prefer the long stems of the coarse grass, leaving behind the shorter growth for the wildebeest. This is the start of an epic and arduous journey. As many as 250,000 wildebeest will die during migration. Among the greatest challenges these animals face on their long trek are the river crossings. Thousands of wildebeest and zebra have gathered on the shores of the Mara River, waiting to cross. They instinctively sense that this short section of their journey is fraught with danger, and they're not mistaken. The herds will have to get past the legions of crocodiles, which each year cluster at these crossing points, assured of an easy feast. To make matters worse, scores of hippo are gathered here, another aggressive and formidable obstacle. But the herd animals are driven by hunger and thirst, and simply cannot resist the lure of the water and the urge to continue on their journey. There is an incredible air of suspense and expectation. The slightest hint of danger instantly sends a ripple of alarm through the animals, causing a chaotic exodus back up to the safety of the riverbank. At times like this, the likelihood of stampede is high, and many animals could be crushed in the panic. It's not long before their instinctive urges overcome their fear, and the whole process starts again. Finally, two zebra make a move and gingerly start to cross. Soon, hundreds of others follow, but they have every right to feel nervous. The crocodiles grip tight on their prey and drag them under to drown. For other members of the herd, it's a terrifyingly close call. But they make it across. Although the migration is a time of feasting for the crocodiles, the majority of the wildebeest and zebra cross the river unscathed. The herd moves on, spending months on the volcanic open plains below the Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania. Here, due to the nutrients in the earth, the grass growth is at its most productive. During this time, calving takes place. In just a few weeks, over 500,000 new calves are born. Calves are protected using a tactic known as herding. Young animals are enclosed and shielded by larger ones. When the grass on the plains starts to dry and turn to semi-desert, it's time to move on once more, and the herds move west. The young have no choice but to keep pace with the adults, despite being only weeks old. Their route is not fixed and may vary year to year, but eventually the herds will loop around and head north again, back to the Mara, where their journey began 10 months before. This is the biggest movement of large mammals on the planet. The huge number of grazing animals involved means there is a permanent, pressing need to find a fresh and plentiful supply of grass. They must keep moving, their life an endless pilgrimage. But the huge numbers in the herds also means that predators will not dent their population, and their future survival will be assured. It's a balance that has been maintained for hundreds of thousands of years. At its heart is the timeless relationship between the rains and the grasslands. Coming up on Earth Wonders, where the world's highest tide creates a daily tidal wave. Nowhere on Earth does the sea's tide rise and fall more dramatically than in the Bay of Fundy. This 270-mile stretch of water along the shores of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia in Canada boasts the highest and fastest tides in the world. An astonishing 115 billion tons of seawater rushes in and out of the bay in just 12 hours. That's the equivalent of all the water in every single river on the planet. Twice a day, the tide line changes by an incredible 50 feet, transforming the coast. As the incoming tide is funneled into the rivers that run into the bay, a great surge of water is created, known as a tidal bore. The Bay of Fundy is a rare and remarkable earth wonder. As the coasts around the Bay of Fundy go through a remarkable transformation twice a day, they reveal strange and beautiful geological riches. The Hopewell Rocks are a stretch of ancient cliffs formed millions of years ago. Back then, layers of rock and pebble compressed and cemented together into a large shelf of conglomerate rock, interspersed with layers of fine sandstone. As these layers were gradually uplifted over time, they broke up into blocks. Centuries of ice and rain eroded them into standing towers. Only when the tide goes out is their true shape revealed. As the tide recedes, the water level drops by 50 feet, as much as a 4-story apartment block. Now, the so-called flower pot rocks can be seen. The strong tides have eroded the softer sandstone away from their bases, creating the distinctive shapes. Greenery clings to their tops, completing the flower pot appearance. At low tide, it's possible to have the surreal experience of roaming the seabed, which only hours before was deep underwater. Elsewhere in the Bay of Fundy, the low tide reveals other treasures. Located at the head of the bay, the 75-foot-high Joggins Cliffs are exposed to constant, extreme tidal action. As the tides erode the cliffs, thousands of fossils are revealed, dating back to the Coal Age. During this era, 300 million years ago, before the time of the dinosaurs, Joggins was covered by lush rainforest. Many of those ancient trees, now petrified, protrude from the cliffs. Beyond the rocks and cliffs, the low tides also reveal mile upon mile of sand flats. Whole islands become temporarily landlocked, and human figures appear tiny, wandering over this vast expanse. Then, as the tide shifts, the seawater returns from the Atlantic, and the bed of the bay is submerged once more. With the water comes spectacular wildlife. The Bay of Fundy is a haven for over 300 fin and humpback whales, and the only known feeding ground for the endangered right whale. The great inflow of water stirs up nutrients, making the bay the perfect feeding ground for creatures that consume over 1 ton of microscopic sea creatures every day. Whales are revered by First Nations people, such as the region's Micmac culture, who have a unique explanation for the Bay of Fundy's remarkable tides. They believe a giant whale causes the strong surge of water by splashing its mighty tail. The Bay of Fundy is thought to get its name from the Portuguese word fundo, meaning funnel. It's a word that accurately describes the shape of the bay. The tide water enters at its widest point, then flows up towards the head of the bay. As it moves, it is effectively squeezed by the ever-narrowing sides and by the constant shallowing of the bottom. This forces the water higher up onto the shores and makes the tide move more swiftly. In the Bay of Fundy, the tides are among the fastest in the world. But on the adjoining Shubenacadie River, the water is calm. Boat crews set off to meet the incoming tide. It's a tense wait, and then the river transforms. A churning wall of water surges up the river, racing in on top of the outgoing tide. This peculiar phenomenon is known as a tidal bore. Nature has created its very own theme park ride, where the waves can reach over 10 feet high. The Bay of Fundy, with its world-beating tides, provides a fascinating example of what can happen when a massive body of water collides head-on with a varied and complex coastline. Coming up next, Earth Wonders delves between the continents, where the Earth is tearing apart. In southwest Iceland, Thingvellir National Park is where our planet is tearing apart. It's one of the few rare places on the Earth's surface where you can see the planet's giant tectonic plates pulling away from each other. This bleak yet beautiful valley is the geological dividing line between Europe and the Americas. It's a place of physical wonder, where geysers spew hot steam into the icy air, and where you can swim between continents. Iceland is just south of the Arctic Circle in the North Atlantic Ocean. But up to 130 million years ago, the Atlantic Ocean didn't exist. It would have been possible to walk straight from Ireland into Canada. Until, that is, a dramatic change took place. The crust of the Earth is made up of strong but brittle rock that is broken into large sections called tectonic plates. These plates float around on the molten rock beneath like the pieces of a giant jigsaw. New rock formed deep within the Earth pushed up and prized the American and European plates apart, creating the Atlantic Ocean. Today, this great dividing line between the continents runs through the middle of the Atlantic at the bottom of the ocean, until it reaches Iceland, where it runs straight through the center of the island. At Thingvellir National Park, this geological boundary can clearly be seen, cleaving through the landscape. It's the only view of the gap between these two great tectonic plates that rises above the ocean. Through this extraordinary landscape runs the Oxarau River. At the edge of the American plate, the crystal clear water cascades over the cliff of the Rift Valley into the plain below, creating Iceland's largest lake, Thingvallavatn. Here, divers prepare for a swim between two continents. The water is not for the faint-hearted. It originates from underground cold water springs and runs at a near freezing 35 degrees. It's a unique and bizarre diving experience. Swimming in the fissure between the tectonic plates, the very place where the world is tearing apart. Iceland has only been inhabited for a relatively short time. The first people to settle here were the Vikings from Norway in 870 AD. They gathered here in Thingvellir to decide on the country's laws, one of the very first parliaments to be held anywhere in the world. This site was chosen because the cliffs created by the tearing of the tectonic plates acts as a natural amphitheater. The Icelandic parliament continued to be held here for nearly 900 years. Evidence of the enormous power raging beneath Iceland's landscape can be seen everywhere. The geyser of Þrottur shoots a column of water and steam up to 100 feet into the air. The end of a journey that starts over 6,000 feet below the surface. At this depth, the water comes into contact with the mighty forces that created the continental boundary. The gap between the tectonic plates is filled with red-hot molten rock called magma, baking in underground chambers at temperatures over 1,300 degrees. As the water nears the magma, it superheats, reaching temperatures well beyond its boiling point. Every 10 minutes or so, the pressure builds until the superheated water thrusts up through openings in the rock towards the surface, where it spectacularly erupts. The powerful natural energy, strong enough to move continents, is harnessed to generate electricity. Just over the road from the Svartsvenki power plant is the world-famous Blue Lagoon Spa. The water here is in fact the runoff from the power plant. It's both clean and naturally heated, a very pleasant 104 degrees. Rich in minerals such as sulfur and silica, the water is reputedly beneficial for a number of skin ailments like eczema and psoriasis. The Blue Lagoon shows the remarkable ways that man can harness the powers of the earth and is one of the most extraordinary places in the world to have a hot bath. The landscape of Thingvellir National Park bears traces of the incredible forces that have ripped apart the face of planet Earth. These forces remain constantly at work and continue to shift, destroy, and recreate the very ground beneath our feet. Next on Earth Wonders, an unexpected Eden in America's Southwest. Set amongst the dry, desert region of southwest Utah is a startling oasis, Zion National Park. A peaceful tree-lined valley is surrounded by huge sandstone monoliths, soaring up to 2,000 feet high. The fast-flowing Virgin River winds through the heart of Zion, traversing narrow gorges where the sun rarely penetrates. Mormon settlers who came here in the mid-1800s found that the high sheltering cliffs and verdant valley offered them sanctuary in an otherwise arid region. They named this landscape Zion because they thought the sculpted rocks to be the natural temples of God. The 229 square miles that make up Zion National Park were once a low-lying sandy desert with vast dunes, reaching over 3,000 feet high. Over millions of years, increasingly more sand and mud eroded from surrounding mountains and was carried into the basin by streams and rivers. Over time, these materials built up in layers and gradually formed sedimentary rock. Then, very slowly, forces deep within the earth started to push the surface of the basin upwards. Zion's elevation rose to as high as 10,000 feet above sea level. The Virgin River, a tributary of the Colorado River, began to cut through this high plateau. The power of fast-flowing water, particularly during flash floods, has created Zion's deep canyons and etched rock faces. The river has also given life to an abundance of plants, which in turn support insects and wildlife. It's this beautiful greenery that sets Zion apart from the other parks in the Southwest. Clusters of magnificent mountains loom above the valley floor, such as the towers and temples of the Virgins, the Three Patriarchs, and the Watchmen. Some of Zion's peaks can be reached by hair-raising walking trails. The most famous is the climb up to Angel's Landing. The trail, one of the most spectacular in the U.S. park system, stretches for 2.5 miles, much of it cut into the rock itself. It's the last half mile that provides the stiffest challenge for those brave enough to make the full 12,000-foot ascent. The final push to the summit involves terrifyingly narrow paths that drop off steeply for hundreds of feet on either side. Hikers use fixed chains to haul themselves up the steep ridges. Once you're at the top, you're rewarded with stunning views over Zion Canyon. It's the perfect vantage point to admire Zion's unique character. The twisting river, the green valley, and the surrounding mountains with their jagged sandstone cliffs. Beneath Angel's Landing is a curved stretch of deep canyon called the Temple of Sinawava. Here, mountains encircle the valley floor, forming a jaw-dropping natural amphitheater. Heading downstream from here is Zion's famous Riverside Walk. This is a stunningly beautiful and peaceful stretch of the park, where small bridges crisscross the winding river, and mature trees line the water's edge. Head upstream from the Temple of Sinawava, and a very different world is revealed. This is the entrance to the Zion Narrows, a slender stretch of deep canyon where the Virgin River reaches from wall to wall. The Narrows represents a trail that is every bit as challenging as the climb up Angel's Landing. The rocks beneath the cold water are like greased bowling balls, making every step treacherous. Sunlight rarely reaches the water, adding to the mysterious atmosphere. The distinctive dark streaking on the rock faces is caused when floodwater washes minerals from vegetation down the cliffs. During rainstorms, the river here is transformed into a deadly and destructive surge. The Virgin River cuts away its canyon faster than its tributaries can cut away their own stream beds. So tributaries end in waterfalls from so-called hanging valleys. Beneath the glittering spray, ferns and mosses cling to the rocks. The emerald pools are where flowing springs have reached a harder rock layer and formed small ponds. It's hard to believe that this moist, green, natural garden is in dry and parched Utah. Zion National Park is a witness to the transformative powers of water. Huge ancient rocks have been worn away, and mountains and deep canyons have been carved by a single river. A beautiful green ecosystem thrives here, in the midst of an otherwise desert-like region. With its many layers of exquisite natural beauty, Zion truly is a promised land. These are just some of the many geological treasures to be discovered as we explore the most extraordinary locations on our planet in search of Earth wonders.